today in the Chris Watts murder case. His hours-long interrogation, the interview with his mistress, and new tonight at 10, Chris Watts on video failing a polygraph test.
Well, Denver 7's Jackie Cray is here now. She's been combing through some of this new video, and it is pretty disturbing, Jackie.
It is. Included in that new batch of video is body camera video from investigators as they searched Chris Watts' home for evidence. At the same time, Watts plays to our cameras on his front porch, pleading for Shanann, Celeste, and Bella's safe return.
Hi, are you Chris?
Chris, yes.
Chris, Officer Wines with the Frederick Police Department.
This is our first glimpse into the crime scene through the eyes of investigators.
Purse is still there. The phone's on the couch. Like her wedding ring sitting on the nightstand. And it's like there's like no sign of Bella, Celeste, or anywhere.
During a 6-hour interrogation, Chris Watts joked, even laughed while answering morbid questions from detectives.
What are ways that you can make someone disappear?
I mean, like, if you talk about like what I've seen like on the movies, or like how people, if you read about other people, I mean, you hire somebody.
Like a hitman?
Yeah, I mean, I had nothing to do with what's going on right now. I did not physically harm her.
He claimed his wife and their children vanished and tried to keep the lies going during a polygraph test.
Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance?
No.
If we do end up finding your wife and your 2 girls murdered, what do you think should happen to that person that would have done that?
The worst possible thing.
Like what?
I mean, it's either going to be like life in prison or the death penalty, isn't it? And that's the only 2 things you really can do.
The 33-year-old never confesses to killing all 3, instead creates a lie about Shanann murdering the girls. But prosecutors say his motive was a fresh start. He'd already begun an affair with a co-worker, Nicole Kessinger.
It wasn't, hey, we should get married, and hey, we should have babies, and hey, I want to live with you, and hey, I need to meet your children now, and let's cut the mom out. It was never like that.
Watts kept photos of her hidden in a secret app on his phone. Kessinger says Watts lied to her, too.
You found out that his... Okay. So again, this room is recorded, and video and audio. We introduced ourselves in the lobbies and earlier, so we're just going to do that again real quick. My name's Kevin Kovac. I'm with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and we're assisting the Frederick Police Department with this case involving Chris Watts. And this is Tim Martinez, also an agent at CBI. Sir, if you just introduce yourself.
Dwayne Kessinger. I'm Nicole's father.
Dwayne, what's your birthday?
November 3rd, 1958.
And home address for you, sir?
8801 West 65th Avenue.
What city?
And that's Arvada, 8004.
And a cell phone or home phone or where?
720-982-4547.
Thank you. And Nicole, can you just introduce yourself for the recording?
Nicole Kessinger. Do you need all the other stuff?
Yes, please.
I live at 12255 Claude Court, Unit 612, or 720-656-9605.
Claude Court, is that? I think we determined it was North Glen, right?
Yes.
Do you know your zip code?
80249.
Okay. Can you speak up just a little bit so the recorder? I know you're tired and you're stressed, and we won't be here any longer than we have to be. You've already had a conversation with people before. You came here on your own free will to talk to us. We picked you up at your request and brought you here. You can get up and leave at any time. You don't have to talk to us. If there's a question you don't want to answer, don't answer it. If you don't want to talk anymore, just tell me I want to leave. And I'm kind of in the way of the door, but you're not being interrogated as a criminal suspect. We're here to understand your relationship with Chris and what you know about Chris and his family, and events relating to Chris Watts. And do you know him as Chris or Christopher?
Either one.
Okay. So the phone number that you reached him on, can you tell me what that number was?
I think I deleted that out of my phone too. I just cut him out of my life. It's a 910 number. You guys have it.
Well, we gave it to Mark yesterday.
Yeah, I probably have it, but just in case.
I don't have it
If I recited it to you, would you know it?
just the first 3 numbers.
But you know it as a 910 number?
Yes, that's what I do know. I mean, that's what I got.
North Carolina or something.
That's
North
what it
Carolina.
is.
Okay. So let's just start with like a timeline of your getting to know Chris, how you guys met, where you met, all those things. And let's just run. And I'm not going to ask you specific questions unless I think it's necessary. I'll let you just tell me your story. I think it's a little bit easier that way. So I just want to know how you met him, where you met him, how long you guys were dating, and those kind of things initially.
Okay. I think I met him sometime in June, probably early June. It might have been May. It was just talking at work. It was pretty casual. And he didn't have a wedding ring on his finger. And every time I talked to him, he didn't tell me that he was in a relationship. He didn't even mention his kids right away either. And then one day he told me that he had 2 kids. I was like, that's pretty cool. And started telling me about his kids.
That sounded like a sarcastic comment.
No, I thought it was kind of cute. I was like, oh, he's a dad. It was like right around Father's Day too. So whenever that is in June.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm not good with holidays.
he told me he had kids, and then it was Father's Day shortly after
Okay.
that. So that's what I do now. And I was like, I thought it was cute. And then he's telling me about him. He's pretty excited about him. And then he mentioned that he did have a significant other. And then he told me that those 2 were in the process of a separation.
Did he mention the children's name or his significant other's name?
I didn't know his significant other's name for a while. And then I think he told me his kids' names pretty quick, but to be honest with you, on an exact date of when that happened, I don't know.
So in May and June, first of all, where do you work?
I work at Anadarko Petroleum Corporation. I'm contracted to Anadarko Petroleum Corporation.
Okay, and you work out of an office setting where?
In Platteville, Colorado.
Okay. And Chris also works out of that location, per se?
Yes. He's in the field, but he comes into the office with his team.
So you work, what is your job responsibility?
I do health, safety, and environment.
Okay, so you work in the office and you take care of health safety for, Anadarko is an oil and gas company, right?
Yes.
So you're doing health safety in the office and Chris works in the field?
Yes.
As a, what kind of job does he do?
He's an operator, so I don't know like all of his daily duties, but he's a field operator, so he works with like the oil wells.
So he goes out and does work on those, whatever
Yes.
That work might be, but he comes into the office frequent?
In the mornings. His team meets in the mornings. They're not all in there every day. Some days some of them are in there, some days other ones are in there, but in the mornings typically from like 6:15 to probably 7, somewhere around there.
And is that where you met Chris?
Yes.
Okay. So can you just take us through kind of a little bit of the early part of how he courted you or you courted him? I don't know which one happened. How you guys got to know each other?
I guess we just started talking. He actually, so part of my job is to manage the gas monitors that we have. So Anadarko requires all of their field personnel to carry like gas monitor sensors for toxic gases, and it's my job to control the inventory, any issues, anything like that. And we were having some pretty serious like equipment issues, and we had numerous amounts of people coming in my office one day, and he happened to be one of them. And I'd seen him before, like they meet in the lunchroom, and that's where I go put my lunch in the fridge. So I'd seen him, but I didn't ever like talk to him. So that day we just started talking, and then every time I saw him in the hallway after that, and it was always hit or miss, like it wasn't an everyday thing, it was just when I saw him, we just started talking, and we just kind of had a lot in common and just hit it off, so we'd always have, pretty good conversations, and then I don't know. One day he told me that he had kids and started talking about his kids, and then mentioned, yes, that I have a wife, but we're getting separated. I said, okay. And then
When do you think that was?
when he said all that,
So specifically when he told you he was getting separated from his wife, was that within the first couple of weeks that you knew him, or was that later on? You said you met him around May or June.
yeah, it was still in June.
Okay.
It would have been before Father's Day.
So had you guys ever gone out on any kind of
No.
date at that time? You just
No,
were
no.
conversing at work?
Yeah, that's all it was. And then, I don't know, we started hanging out. We hung out. We went to a park. Hung out at a park.
Let's go back real quick. So why did he tell you that he was getting a divorce? Did he ask you out at that time?
No, he didn't. I think he was probably interested in me. And so, he talked to me a couple times via his work phone, and I was like, no. Like, it was still very, like, friendly conversation. But then when I realized, like, this man is interested in me, I'm interested in him, this is personal, so we got away from the Anadarko thing because I really don't want those guys affiliated with any of this. And
so you have a work phone that's specifically...
No, I have one phone that I do both on. He has two phones.
Okay, so he had your phone, the 720-656.
That's the only number that I roll with all the time.
Okay.
So he has two phones.
All right. One of those owned by Anadarko and
Yes,
one
sir.
personal.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what his Anadarko phone number was? Okay.
It's been so long, and I mean, I'm sure I could like look it up, but I tried to look it up for those guys yesterday, and I couldn't find it.
Okay. We can find it. That's okay. Just wondering if you knew it.
But at that point, we just like took it to his phone because I just felt it was like better that way. And we just continued to talk, and then
Let me go back to the park. Where's the park?
it's like down the street from my house. It's called East Lake Number 3.
Your house
Yes.
in Northglen?
Yes.
And that was in the June time frame.
Yeah, like the beginning of July. It was like right around my birthday. It's like so sometime at the very end of June or the beginning of July.
Okay. And that's the first meeting you had outside of work.
Yeah.
The basic conversation for a first date?
I mean, we kept it pretty simple, I guess, you know. I don't even remember everything we talked about. We
Sure.
were there for a few hours. But
Understand so if I ask about conversation, what I'm looking for, was he talking about his family during any of these meetings? Those are the kind of, I understand, whatever you guys were talking about, relationship, your life, your interests, those things, we don't need to know that. What I'm interested in is knowing is when he brings up his children, when he brings up his wife, when he brings up financial information, when he brings up his home, when he brings up anything that may have been, and it's been a few days, so you've had a chance to reflect on.
The front door opened to flashing police lights, concerned neighbors, and a husband who insisted his family had simply vanished. 7 years later, that moment still echoes, not because of what was said, but because of what would eventually be confessed. Chris Watts stood at the center of one of the most chilling crimes in modern history, and long after the courtroom doors closed, his words continued to change, shift, and darken. In the years since the murders of Shawn Watts and her two young daughters, investigators, psychologists, and the public have returned again and again to Chris Watts' confessions. Not just the first one, delivered under pressure and riddled with lies, but the later versions, spoken from behind prison walls, where details grew more graphic, more unsettling, and more difficult to ignore. Each confession claimed to be the truth. Each one contradicted the last. And with every retelling, the question became more disturbing. Why did the story keep changing? This story is not just about what happened in 2018. It is about what followed. About a man who had already admitted guilt, yet continued to speak as though the final truth was still hidden somewhere inside him. Letters, interviews, prison conversations, each revealing fragments of remorse, manipulation, and a need to control the narrative long after the damage was done. 7 years later, the crime itself is no longer the only horror. The confessions have become their own shadow, raising questions about honesty, memory, and whether the full truth was ever meant to be known. Tonight, we begin tracing that shadow, back to where it started, and forward into the disturbing legacy it left behind. If you want to follow this story and others like it, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Shadow of Deceit, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in this dark journey. Before the world knew his name, Chris Watts appeared painfully ordinary. He was quiet, methodical, and predictable, a man who blended easily into the background. Friends described him as reliable. Coworkers saw him as disciplined and hardworking. He built a life that, on the surface, looked stable and secure. A steady job, a suburban home, a wife who documented their family's milestones online, 2 young daughters who seemed to adore their father, and another child on the way. Shannon Watts was the visible heartbeat of the household. Charismatic, ambitious, and outspoken, she filled their home with plans and expectations. She dreamed of financial stability, personal growth, and a future that felt earned after years of struggle. Her social media presence painted a picture of optimism, but behind the posts were mounting pressures: health concerns, financial strain, and a marriage quietly drifting off course. Chris, meanwhile, was changing in ways few people noticed at first. He lost weight. He became more distant. He stopped engaging emotionally, retreating inward as responsibilities closed in. To those around him, it looked like self-improvement. To Sean, and it felt like abandonment. The gap between who they were presenting to the world and who they were becoming behind closed doors continued to widen. Into that space stepped temptation and secrecy. Chris began imagining a different life, one without the weight of expectation, without conflict, without accountability. The man who had always followed instructions started making private decisions. Small lies replaced honest conversations. Silence replaced confrontation. And control, once external, shifted inward. What makes this story so unsettling is not just the outcome, but how quietly it formed. There were no explosive fights made public. No dramatic ultimatums. Just a slow erosion of connection, masked by routine and normalcy. The kind of unraveling that, in hindsight, feels obvious but in real time went unnoticed. By the time the fractures became visible, the damage had already been done. And the man the world thought it knew was no longer the man living inside that house. Long before the crime, there were signs that something was wrong. Quiet signals buried beneath routine and familiarity. Chris Watts did not explode into violence overnight. His descent was gradual, marked by subtle shifts that only make sense in retrospect. The red flags were not dramatic. They were ordinary, and that is what made them dangerous. Chris began emotionally withdrawing from his family. Calls went unanswered. Messages were delayed or ignored. When Shannon traveled for work, she sensed the distance immediately, describing him as cold and uninterested, no longer reassuring her with affection or concern. He stopped saying, "I love you," without prompting. His tone changed. His presence faded. What once felt like partnership began to feel like obligation. Financial pressure added another layer of strain. Debt loomed quietly in the background, and the image of success they worked hard to maintain grew heavier with each passing month. Instead of confronting the stress, Chris retreated further inward. He avoided conflict not by resolving it, but by refusing to engage at all. Silence became his coping mechanism, and in that silence, resentment grew. His routines also shifted. He became obsessed with control: his body, his time, his privacy. Passwords changed. Phones were guarded. Conversations became guarded too. There was a growing sense that he was living 2 lives, one visible and one concealed. While Sean searched for reassurance, Chris was already elsewhere emotionally, rehearsing a future that no longer included his family. Perhaps the most chilling red flag was how calmly he detached from responsibility. He spoke about his children less. He stopped participating in decisions. He behaved as though obligations were temporary inconveniences rather than lifelong commitments. To outsiders, he still appeared calm, polite, dependable. But inside the walls of that home, he was slipping away. What makes these warning signs so haunting is how easily they can be overlooked. Many families experience distance. Many marriages strain under pressure. But when withdrawal becomes total, when empathy disappears, when secrecy replaces honesty, the danger grows quietly. And by the time anyone realized just how far Chris Watts had gone emotionally, he had already crossed a line from which there was no return.
Considered the arguments made by the attorneys. The court has considered the statements made by the victims in this case. The court's going to find that the plea agreement is fair and reasonable under the circumstances. I want to acknowledge the Rusick family as well as the Watts family that showing mercy on Mr. Watts is understood, and I respect that decision to request that the district attorney not seek the death penalty in this case. And so the court is going to accept this plea bargain under the circumstances. Words that come to mind when I hear the evidence in this case are a senseless crime and the viciousness of the crime. And equally aggravating in this court's determination is the despicable act of disposing of the bodies in the manner in which they were done in this case. I've been a judicial officer now for starting my 17th year, and I could objectively say that this is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen. And nothing less than a maximum sentence would be appropriate, and anything less than the maximum sentence would depreciate the seriousness of this offense. So the court is going to sentence Mr. Watts as follows. With regard to count number 1, murder in the first degree as it relates to Shanann Watts, the court is going to sentence you, sir, to a life sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections, followed, with no possibility of parole. And that is going to run consecutively to all but counts 3 and 4. With regard to count 2, as it relates to murder in the first degree with Bella, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole. With regard to count number 3, the court is going to sentence you as it relates to Celeste to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole. With regard to counts 4 and 5 relating to Bella and Celeste as a different theory of first-degree murder, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections, and legally those sentences must run concurrently as a different theory of first-degree murder. Recognizing the unlawful termination of pregnancy for the unborn child that has been named Nico, the court absolutely believes that the maximum sentence of 48 years would be appropriate to run consecutive to the other charges, with an additional mandatory parole period of 3 years as set forth by statute. With regard to count number 7, as it relates to tampering with a deceased body, as well as counts 8 and 9, each a class 3 felony, the court is going to impose a maximum sentence of 12 years each for those counts to run consecutively to the other counts. The court is going to order that the statutory fees be paid and
in the early hours of August 13, 2018, the quiet of a Colorado morning concealed an act that would later shake the world. Inside a suburban home, the final moments unfolded not with chaos, but with a chilling calm. The crime was not impulsive. It was deliberate, and it was carried out by someone the victims trusted most. The sequence of events emerged slowly, pieced together through evidence and later admissions. Shanann had returned from a business trip late the night before. By morning, she and her children were gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle visible to the outside world. The house remained eerily intact, as if life had simply paused and walked away. What investigators would later confirm is that this was a crime rooted in control. The timing, the setting, and the method all pointed to premeditation. Chris Watts moved through the hours that followed with mechanical precision. He loaded his truck before sunrise. He drove to a remote work site he knew well, and there, beneath the open sky, he attempted to erase his family from existence. The brutality of the crime is difficult to comprehend not because of its violence alone, but because of its intimacy. These were not strangers. These were lives bound by shared history, routine, and love, at least once. The acts were carried out quietly, without witnesses, under the assumption that secrecy would equal safety. But crimes like this leave echoes. They leave traces, and no amount of planning can fully silence the truth. By mid-morning, concern had already begun to spread. Friends noticed unanswered messages. Schedules went unkept. The absence felt wrong. And as the day unfolded, the illusion Chris Watts tried to maintain began to crack under the weight of reality. What he believed would remain hidden was already unraveling. And the truth, once disturbed, would not stay buried for long. The hours that followed were defined by performance. Chris Watts returned home and stepped into a role he believed he could control. He moved through the day as if routine alone could shield him from suspicion. Messages were sent. Calls were made. Concern was rehearsed. But beneath the surface, the cracks appeared almost immediately. When law enforcement arrived, the house spoke louder than he ever could. Personal belongings were untouched. Shanann's phone lay behind, silent. Her purse remained. The children's medications and essentials were still inside. Nothing suggested a voluntary disappearance. What should have looked like a sudden departure instead felt like an interruption. Life paused mid-sentence. Surveillance footage from a neighbor would become one of the most damning pieces of evidence. The camera captured Chris backing his truck into the driveway in the early morning hours, a deviation from his usual routine. His movements appeared hurried, repetitive, unnatural. Even without sound, the footage carried a sense of urgency that contradicted his calm demeanor. Digital evidence followed. Phone records revealed patterns he could not explain away. Deleted messages, internet searches, location data that placed him exactly where investigators feared he had been. Each data point narrowed the story, reducing his options with mathematical precision. As the investigation intensified, Chris's composure began to fracture. His explanations shifted. Timelines changed. Statements contradicted one another. The mask he wore slipped just enough for investigators to notice. And when subjected to a polygraph examination, the illusion collapsed entirely. The truth did not emerge all at once. It came in fragments shaped by pressure and exposure. Each piece revealed a man who believed he could outthink consequence, who underestimated evidence, and who failed to grasp that silence itself can testify. What began as an attempt to disappear his family became one of the fastest unraveling murder investigations in recent memory. And with every hour that passed, the story Chris Watts tried to sell fell further away from the truth he could no longer outrun. The legal process moved quickly, driven by the overwhelming weight of evidence and the urgency to prevent further harm. Within weeks, Chris Watts was in custody, facing charges that reflected the magnitude of what had been done. Prosecutors laid out a case built on forensic certainty, digital timelines, surveillance footage, GPS data, and the recovery of the bodies at his worksite. There was no ambiguity left to argue. The facts spoke with brutal clarity. As the case advanced, the possibility of a lengthy trial loomed, but it never came. Chris Watts chose to plead guilty, accepting responsibility in a legal sense while sparing the community the trauma of prolonged proceedings. The plea removed any doubt about his culpability, but it did not bring answers that felt complete. Motive, intention, and the depth of his deception remained topics of debate long after the courtroom doors closed. The sentencing was decisive. Multiple life sentences were handed down, to be served without the possibility of parole. It was a legal conclusion designed to ensure that he would never again walk free, never again blend into ordinary life. The court acknowledged not only the loss of lives, but the calculated nature of the acts and the betrayal of trust at their core. Yet even in resolution, the case refused to settle. The guilty plea ended the trial, but it did not end public scrutiny. Questions lingered about what was known, what was planned, and what truths were still withheld. If this story stayed with you, consider what it asks of us about attention, accountability, and the stories we choose to believe. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you value careful, respectful true crime storytelling, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Shadow of Deceit. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter, where we continue to examine the shadows that linger long after the headlines fade.